Good morning. How's everybody doing this morning? Are you alive? Are you awake? Did you survive the rain? Who went food trucking yesterday? Anybody go food trucking? So I was talking to my wife and I told her, I said, I should come in, I should tell a food truck joke. Have y'all ever tried to find a truck joke online? I didn't have any luck. The only thing I found was not appropriate to tell you guys in church. So like he said, my name is Pastor Zach, and I love and adore your pastors. Do you guys not have the best pastors? Come on, somebody. Y'all got the best pastors. I love them, and he has a great name. He's got a great name. That helps him. So I'm Pastor Zach. I'm here with my wife, Taylor, and our two kids. And we love Graham, Texas so much that we named our first son Graham. Graham. And so we're here. I got Graham. He's just a little bit over 2 years old, and we have Heidi Grace. She's with us today too. And I'm just excited to be here. I was asking my wife. I'm like, so how should I dress? Like, what should I do? And I just looked at her and I said, boots. And she goes, yeah, boots. So I did boots for you guys today. So I'm excited. So let me ask you a question before we dive into it today. Who started this year? I know we're like halfway through the year, guys. 2019 is just flying by. Who started this year with a resolution? Like you wanted to do something better? Anybody? I talked to God this morning, and he told me if you raise your hand in church, he's not going to strike you dead. He won't. So anybody? Any resolutions? Who still has their resolution? Who's still working on it? Good job. There you go. I see you. I see you back there. All right. Well, I had a resolution that I was going to read a lot more this year. I was doing some research, and they were saying, every great mind is a reader. They're always reading. They're always learning something. And so I was so excited. I woke up January 1, 2019, and I ran into the living room, and I turned on my TV, and I turned on all the subtitles to all my favorite TV stations. And I have read more in the past 6 months. I'm telling you guys, you should try it. Ask my wife. I'm a lot smarter today than I was 6 months ago. But the reason we set resolutions, the reason that we do all these things is because we're trying to get better, right? We want to get better, and I believe that's a good thing. We want our life to matter. We want to live a life of purpose. We don't just want to live a life that's just the same old every day, that when we're on our deathbed one day, we don't leave a legacy. I think all of us want to leave a legacy. I think we all want to make a difference, right? And so what I'm going to talk to you today is something that's very near and dear to my heart because I'm passionate about it, and it's going from a life of confusion to a life of clarity. And so it's going from when I'm talking about confusion, when I'm talking about clarity, I'm talking about your purpose and the reason you wake up every day, and maybe this internal struggle that you're having in your walk with God. And so we're going to start today. We're going to go to Mark chapter 10, verse 17. You guys can go ahead and go there, or you can follow on the screen. And so we're just going to read this together. It says, as he, Jesus is who it's talking about, went out into the street, a man came running up, greeted him with great reverence, and asked, "Good teacher, what must I do to get eternal life?" Jesus said, "Why are you calling me good? No one is good, only God. You know the commandments." He says, you know this. Don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't lie, don't cheat. Honor your father and your mother. He said, "Teacher, I have from my youth kept them all." It's like, okay, come on. But apparently he had, so we're just going to take it at face value. Okay, sure, you kept them all. This is my favorite part of the verse, though. It says, Jesus looked him hard in the eye, and it says, and loved him. We're going to come back to that. Remember that. He said, there's one thing left. Go sell whatever you own and give it to the poor. It's terrible. Why would you tell me that, Jesus? All your wealth will then be heavenly wealth, and come follow me. And the man acted a lot like kind of how I felt when I read this scripture. It says, the man's face clouded over. This was the last thing he expected to hear, and he walked off with a heavy heart. It says he was holding on tight to a lot of things and not about to let go. Looking at his disciples, Jesus said, do you have any idea how difficult it is for people who have it all to enter God's kingdom? The disciples couldn't believe what they were hearing, but Jesus kept on. He said, you can't imagine how difficult. I'd say it's easier for a camel to go through a needle's eye than for the rich to get into God's kingdom. Now that set the disciples back on their heels. Then who has any chance at all, they asked. It says Jesus was blunt. He said, there's no chance at all if you think you can pull it off by yourself. But you got every chance in the world if you will let God do it. And so I'm going to give you guys a quote today that I want you to write down. I want you to get it tattooed on your forearm. I mean, whatever you need to do to remember this, you guys do it, okay? So the quote is, our greatest fear should not be of failure, but of succeeding at things in life that don't really matter. Our greatest fear should not be of failure. It shouldn't be of messing up, but it should be succeeding at things in life that don't matter. And so today, I really believe that God wants to take you from a life of confusion to a life of clarity. Anybody believe that? Anybody? Y'all still awake? Okay, good. And so let's talk about clarity. What is the definition of clarity? So I went to the good old Webster's, and I'm going to read this to you guys. So the clarity defined is the quality of being certain or definite, the quality of transparency or purity, the quality of being easy to see or hear. And so I'm not going to lie, I read this scripture, and I kind of got mad at Jesus. I'm like, this guy checked all the boxes, and you're going to make him jump through another hoop. It'd be like me studying for a test, right? And I've been studying for this test my whole life. Like, maybe you've got some college students that just got in doing the SAT or the big test that they've got to do to get into school. It's like it's a big, stressful test. And this is the moment of truth. He comes to Jesus and he says, listen, I've been studying for this test and I took it and I passed it. I know I aced this test. It'd be like me walking in and handing my test in to the teacher and the teacher being like, Zach, I just don't really like your shoes today. I mean, it looks like you got it all together, but I feel like there's something else that you got to do. Be like, no, my shoes have nothing to do with the test. It's like, I feel like this guy, he did all the right things, so why is Jesus giving him all these extra things he's got to do? And this is the reason why, though, and I told you we're going to come back to this. So it tells us in verse 21, it says, he looked him hard in the eye, and it says, and loved him. Jesus loved him. Let me be the first to be honest. Jesus, I don't want you to love me that way. I don't want that kind of love. I want the feel-good kind of love. I want to be able to come to church, put my smile on, raise my hands a little bit, and leave and go do my thing. And then when I need something, like you love me then, like I don't want the kind of love that's demanding all these things of me, right? And so verse 22 says that his face clouded over when Jesus gave him this news. It was the last thing that he expected to hear, and he walked away. He was holding on tight to a lot of things and not about to let go. So let's do this. Let's dive into what confusion can look like in your life. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you three signs that you may be struggling with confusion in your life. And number one is this, and it's I'm death gripping everything in my life. I'm death gripping everything in my life. So I got to ask you a question. This is a really important question. Who or what sits on the throne of your heart? Who or what sits on the throne of your heart? Oh, well, Zach, God sits on the throne of my heart. Well, let me just read this verse real quick. 1 Samuel 16:7 says this. The Lord does not look at the things that people look at. He doesn't look at the same things that you and I look at. You look really nice this morning and you smell good too. But God doesn't care. Your neighbor cares, and you should smell nice when you come to church. But God doesn't care. He doesn't look at your bank account. He doesn't look at the car that you drive. He doesn't look at all the stuff you do for Jesus, right? The Lord does not look at the things that people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And let me just tell you, that's what Jesus did with this man. So he came and he had all the boxes checked, but it says he looked at him hard. And I believe when he was looking at him hard, he was looking deeper. He was looking deep into his heart. Everyone else in the circle says he had it all together. He had the boxes checked. But Jesus saw something else sitting on the throne of his heart. So let me ask you this. What's typically sitting on the throne of our hearts? It's the thing that we're holding on to tight, not about to let go of. Maybe you're a worrier. I got any grandmas in here? Any grandmas with rocking chairs, worry chairs? Maybe you're a worrier. Maybe you worried about the weather last night. Maybe you thought your house was going to just float down the road. Maybe you worried about the tires on your car. Maybe you worry about your money and your kids and your kids' kids. And maybe you just worry. Maybe that's like your thing. Maybe you just have such a strong desire to be successful. Like you just want to leave a mark. Like you want to provide for your family. Maybe that's what sits on the throne of your heart. Maybe it's your relationships. Maybe your wife or your husband or your kids. Maybe they sit on the throne of your heart. Get this one. Maybe it's your singleness. Maybe you're so tired of being single. Maybe you're so ready for that next phase of life that you've put that on your heart. Because what happens is the things that we spend our time, our money, and our attention on will always, everybody say always, will always reveal the condition of your heart. I'm going to say that again. Where you spend your time, your money, and your energy will always reveal the condition of your heart. And so Jesus knew. He looked at this guy. He said, listen, unless you give this up, I'll never have an open seat on the throne of your heart. Like you can come follow me, like you can take the physical steps, but there's going to be something blocking what's most important, and that's the throne of your heart. You guys have been so blessed. You've had Pastor Andrew Holland with you the last 3 or 4 weeks, right? Isn't he awesome? Isn't he so much smarter than I am? Like, he's so smart. Like, he's the smartest guy ever. And he came and he preached at Longview back about 3 months ago, and he preached on being blessed and what it means to be blessed. And he said something, I want you guys to hear this. He said, if all the earthly blessing that God gave you, if it instantly vanished, would you still call yourself blessed? If all the stuff was gone, if the job was gone, if all the stuff was gone, would you still call yourself blessed? And let me ask you this. If you struggle saying yes just immediately, can I tell you why? It's because we've put the gifts on the throne that only belong to the gift giver. It's because we've elevated what God has done for us above God himself, which is never what God intended. And it will always lead to a life of confusion. So number 2, I'm going to give you this one. You may be struggling with confusion in your life if you're goal-focused and not mission-focused. I'll say it like this too. Maybe you're only focused on the end desire and not the path to get there. And so, did you know this, that only 7% of all people that set weight loss goals achieve their goals? That is depressing. It makes me feel like, oh, I'm just not going to set any weight loss goals. I'm going to stay in the safe zone. So only 7% of people that set weight loss goals actually hit their goal. So what is the differentiating factor between the 93% and the 7? Does anybody know? The 7% learn to fall in love with the process. And so it's really easy when you're in the grocery store and you walk by the magazine rack and there's the guy that's just like a 32-pack, and he's standing there and he's like covered in water, and he's the most beautiful dude you've ever seen in your life, and he's giving you like the Zoolander look like. It's like, you see that, and I'm like, I want that. I want a 32-pack. And it's easy for the women to walk by and see the chicks doing the same thing. It's like, what is this? That's not even fair, right? But it's easy to fall in love with the idea of a better me, right? But then we go out for a run, and we start sweating. And we get a stitch in our side, and our feet start hurting, and we get shin splints, and my back hurts, and it's hot out of here, and I'm getting bit by bugs. What is this? But we don't love the process, right? The process is not fun unless you're a psycho. Like, you just like doing those things, which I heard a thing the other day. It's like, do people running marathons know that they don't have to do that? Like, do they know they don't have to actually go run marathons? So, but we want instant, right? And so the man's question when he comes up to Jesus is, what must I do to get eternal life? He's focused on the end result, but Jesus was focused on, follow me. Follow me. We want instant. That's why we play the lottery. Now, you're church folks. You don't play the lottery. But that's why we play the lottery. That's why we take weight loss pills instead of going and doing all the miserable things that I just talked about. Ladies, that's why you wear Spanx. That's why I'm wearing a pair right now. So those are, we want instant, right? I got to look good in them jeans, right? So Jesus looked at him and he loved him and he told him, listen, if you're going to follow me, if you're really going to follow me, things are going to have to change. And can I just be honest with you today? Jesus loves you too, friend, and he knows what's best for you. And he's looking at you and he's saying, listen, if you're really going to follow me, if we're really going to do this, then some things are going to have to change. Some things are going to have to change. And so, let me ask you this. Who makes decisions for the kingdom? The king, right? And so, who gets to make decisions for this kingdom? The king. Whoever is sitting on that throne. And so, when I got pursuit of wealth, sitting on the throne, that is what is going to direct this kingdom. But when I have what God has for me on the throne, that is what's going to direct the decisions for this kingdom. So number 3, I'm just going to let you know, this one's kind of hard. It's hard. It's heavy, but we're going to get to the positive, uplifting stuff in a moment, okay? So number 3 is maybe you're struggling with confusion if you've built your house on the sand. If you built your house on the sand. And so that quote that I said at the beginning of the message, I'm going to say again, our greatest fear should not be of failure, but of succeeding at things in life that don't really matter. And so what if I am successful by all of your standards? What if I'm successful by all the world's standards, but I miss God's standard of success? What then? What then? So I'm gonna do a little exercise with you guys. And so I want everybody just to close your eyes. Patricia, close your eyes. Okay. If there's actually a Patricia in here, I'm sorry. I'm trying to be funny. I'm not going to call you out again, Patricia. So close your eyes. Okay, I want you to imagine that you're opening a door. And when you open this door, there's just this big white room. Just big, empty white room, as vast and as big as you can imagine. And you walk in, you shut the door behind you, and when you turn back around and you start walking into this room, you realize that there's 2 chairs in the middle of this room. And one of those chairs is empty. It's for you. And right about 5 or 6 foot in front of that chair is another chair, and there sits Jesus. You walk up to the chair, and you go to sit down. As you sit down, you can't help but notice the holes in his hands. He actually has the holes in his hands and the holes in his feet. So you sit there, and you're realizing, like, holy cow, this is actually Jesus himself. And you look up, and you finally make eye contact with him, and he's just got this huge, just incredible smile on his face. And he's looking at you, and he's waiting for you to say something. What do you say in that moment? Do you talk about your life on earth? Do you talk about all that he did for you? Do you just go and just lay at his feet and just cry because it's just such a crazy, surreal moment? Do you yell at him because you're mad at him for things that you thought were his fault? How does that moment play out for you? What does that look like? Now, I want you to look up at me. I want you to listen to what I'm about to say. That moment is going to happen. It's going to happen. That moment is more real than the chair that you're sitting in right now and me up on this platform speaking to you. It's going to happen. I've said this a lot, and I'm going to continue to say it. The most important moment of your life, of your existence, was not when you were born. It's not when you die. It's not when you get married. It's not when you have kids. It's not when you get a promotion. It's not when you get the house or the car. It's when you stand in front of Jesus one day. That single moment is the most important thing of your entire existence. It's the most important thing. And so you got to ask yourself, have I built my life around that moment being the most important moment? Because what I don't want to do, and let me just tell you what you don't want to do, is be successful by everybody else's standards and then miss God's standard for your life. It's not what you want to do. Okay. Everybody go. Okay, we're going to get to the good stuff now. So what does clarity look like? So those are three things that maybe you fall into one of those categories, and maybe you've been struggling to find your purpose. Maybe you've been struggling to find what's actually valuable in your life. But I'm gonna show you how to get clarity in your life. And so, number one, how to get clarity in your life is let God in. Let God into your stuff. Not like come to church and look good and leave and then never let God in. Really let God into your stuff. And so what happens to us is that when we're born, we're pure. We're great little kids. Some of you probably weren't, but I'm just going to say that we're all great kids. And so I was a terrible kid is why it's funny that I say that. But we're pure at heart, right? But then we start going through life and people start hurting us. We start walking through hard stuff. And so our spirit gets kind of clouded. It gets kind of hazy. And the first time you step into a church, or the first time you really encounter God, and you're sincere and you really want God to do something in your life, you're reading the Bible because you want to learn. You're coming into worship because you really want to worship. When the preacher's talking, you're writing notes and you're engaged in what's going on. As you begin to do that and you're genuine, God begins to pour himself out onto you. And he begins to give you more and more of himself. And as that happens, all the hazy stuff begins to kind of just get washed out. It begins to leave, and you get clarity in your life. And so I want to read a verse real quick, and it's James, and this is not in your notes. I added this morning. The guys in the back are like, thanks, dude. We have this perfect slide presentation for you, and you're going to add stuff this morning. Okay, so James chapter 1, verse 22 says this: do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Here's what it says: do what it says. That's the hardest words. Those are the hardest words to hear sometimes. Just do it. Just do what it says to do. Verse 25 says, whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom, which is the word of God, and continues in it, not forgetting what they've heard, but doing it, they will be blessed in what they do. So it's telling me that the blessing does not come from hearing it. The blessing does not come in my life from sitting in the seat that you're sitting in. The blessing comes when you walk back out the doors and you do it. That's where the blessing comes. And so that's also where the clarity is going to come. Okay, so number two, and this is super practical. This is so easy a caveman can do it. Okay? So number two, just take your first faith step. Just take your first faith step. What is your next faith step right now? Where you're at in your spiritual walk, what does that look like? So I'm going to give you some really practical stuff. I'm going to talk to the worrying grandma that I was talking to earlier, okay? If you worry all the time, you can leave here today and you can go sit in your rocking chair and you can worry. Just like the rocking chair, it'll give you something to do, but it's not going to get you anywhere. Or today, when we end the service and we have the prayer team come forward, you can say, you know what, I'm not going to be ruled by worry anymore. I am tired of that. That is not God's best for me. And you can take a faith step today, and you can come pray with someone on the prayer team and get a breakthrough in your life from the worry that's been holding you back. That is a practical faith step that you can take today. Maybe you're sitting here, and when I talked about the guy that built his house on the sand, you're freaking out. You're thinking, I've been chasing money my whole life. That's all I've been doing. That's all I care about. That's all I've been doing. And it's convicting you and it's challenging you. And you're tempted to do just what the rich young ruler did, which was put his head down in discouragement and just walk away and just keep doing what you're doing. But what if God had an extra special grace for you today to take just your first faith step? You don't have to have all the answers, but what if today you feel that tug in your heart to live for something bigger than money? What if today you feel in your heart something bigger than to just live for fun? What if today you feel a draw on your heart to start living for something that matters? Today, we're going to have a prayer team at the end of this service. I want to encourage you. Come pray. You don't have to have all the answers. They do. I'm just kidding. They don't. They don't have all the answers. They're like, don't say that. Come on. So, but I want to encourage you. Take a faith step. Quit staying where you are. Like spiritual maturity has nothing to do with your age. Has nothing to do with your age. What spiritual maturity does have to do with is, will you let God in and will you take a faith step? Will you be a hearer of the word and be a doer of the word? That is the only thing that separates those that are not mature in their walk with God from those that are, is will you implement what God's trying to do in your life? Okay? And so, number 3, this is the last thing I got for you, and this is good. To get clarity in your life, you need to search for purpose as though your life depended on it, because it does. It does. And let me say this, your purpose is not about you. It's not. Oh, man. You mean tell me that boat that I've been saving all my money for, that ain't my purpose? No, it ain't your purpose. It's not your purpose. Your purpose is not about you. It's about God and God's people. Your purpose will always be found under that umbrella. Is it about loving God and loving people? It's always what it's about. Let me just say this. There's some of us in this room that God's called you. You know what your purpose is, without a doubt. I don't have to beat it over your head. I don't have to tell you. Let me just say this. Your purpose isn't going to just fly in your car window one day and slap you up the head either. Like, your purpose, you got to go find it. Like, you don't know what your purpose is? Well, you got to go serve somewhere. You got to hop on the dream team. You got to start helping out with baptisms. You got to start greeting. You got to start finding a way to figure it out, because it's not going to just slap you upside the head. It's not going to happen. And so, but some of you know this, but you just keep living life because it's so comfy and it's so easy. But let me just tell you, God did not call you to live a life that you don't actually need Him in order to live it. Like, He called you to do stuff that you're going to say, I am so uncomfortable right now. I am so nervous right now. This is so outside of my comfort zone. God, I need you. That is the life that He called you to live, not one that where you can operate with or without God. So I just want to challenge you with that. You need to find your purpose. Search for your purpose as though your life depended on it. So I'm going to end with a quick story. I'm doing so good on time. Aren't you so proud of me? And so they told me I had like 2.5 hours, and I was like, no, I'm not going to do that to these poor people, you know. So I'm going to tell you a quick story real quick. When I was 19 years old, y'all are like, yeah, what, yesterday? Yeah. When I was 19 years old, hey, I can't grow a beard, okay? All the other pastors that y'all have like these beautiful, manly, incredible beards. And I just look like Joe Dirt when I try to grow it. It just comes in like at a point to the corner of my mouth. And I'm just not going to do it. I can't. So, okay. So several years ago, when I was 19 years old, someone approached me and asked me if I wanted to go on a mission trip. I'd never been on a mission trip before. And it was in Africa, which for me, I'm like, whoa, that's cool. But I was praying about it, and I really did feel like the Lord was telling me that I needed to go on this trip. And so I told him, I said, yeah, I'd love to go. And a week later, they told me, hey, you need to raise $3,000 to go on the trip. I'm like, well, why didn't you tell me that before? Maybe I'd have felt a little different about saying yes, you know. And they're like, well, hey, did God call you to do it? Did God tell you that you were supposed to go on this trip? Well, I said, yeah, I really do feel like the Lord told me. And they said, well, God will always provide. If God has called you to do something, and this is free, this has nothing to do with where I'm going, don't ever let money keep you from doing what God's called you to do. Whether you have so much of it that you can't stop working, or you're going to lose it all to go do what God's called you to do, or you don't have any money, and you can't afford to go do what God's called you to do, God will always, 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 always make a way if you will just say yes. He's done it in my life over and over and over and over. So I'm 19 years old. I got to raise $3,000 to go on this trip. I'm 19 years old. I don't have $3,000. And so I start working, and I start getting in touch with everybody that ever really encouraged me, spoken into my life, and just saying, hey, would you consider supporting me on this trip? And within like a month, I'd raised $3,000, which was just blew my mind. I had never done it before. That's just God doing what God does. And so I go on this trip, and we go out to Africa, and we're in the Ivory Coast, and we're in the middle of nowhere. I mean, this is what they call the bush. I mean, no electricity, no running water. This is as third world gets. And so we're going and we're doing medical missions. And so we'll show up at a village, and we'll preach the gospel through a megaphone in their language. And then they had all these benches lined up. And so like we would sit down at the end of this bench, it's kind of straddle it, and then people would come up, and they would have like all these injuries, like they'd have cuts and bruises and scrapes and fungus. I mean, just any kind of fungus you can imagine. I saw it. I'm just telling you how it was. And they come up, and we would start working on these people or whatever. Well, the first day that we do it, we had a doctor with us, and he said, look, now, y'all watch me. I'm going to do it for 3 or 4 people, and I'm going to cut y'all loose and let you go. And so we watched this doctor, and he says, all right, who's next? Who's ready to hop in here? And I said, hey, I didn't raise $3,000 to come watch you fix people's fungus. Give me the fungus. I want in there. I'm going to do it. Okay. So I sit down, and I straddle this bench, and the very first person that walks up to me is about this 70-year-old woman that's about this big around. She probably weighs 90 pounds. And about 30 pounds of her 90 pounds is all in her right leg. She has a condition called elephantitis. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this. But her knee and her foot, all of it's about that big around. Just swollen from her hip all the way down her leg. She sits down on the end of this bench, and we help her get her leg up on this thing, and it's bad, guys. I mean, there's flies all over it. There's cuts and scrapes, and it's just bad. And I look at the doctor. Like, what am I going to do with this? And he said, well, do what you can. And so I start just doing what I can, and I start cleaning her scrapes and her cuts and bandaging them and just trying to take care of her best I can. And I work on this woman's leg for about 30 minutes. And when I get done, she stands up, and she still has elephantitis. And I have this great internal struggle. I'm asking God all these questions. And she stands up, and she looks at me, and she smiles the most just gratitude-filled smile that I've ever seen. And she tells a translator to tell me, God bless you and thank you so much. And I'm like, lady, you still got elephantitis. I didn't help you that much, you know. But I smile back at her, and I tell the translator, God bless you too. And then she said something that changed me forever. And she told the translator, if I can just get out to the field every day and get just enough food so that me and my family can survive, I know that we're going to be okay. This woman's 70 years old. When I'm 70 years old, you know what I'm going to do? Sit in a recliner under the air conditioner. So not only is she out in the field every day doing this, but she's doing it with just a disease that's debilitating. I can't begin to imagine what that's like. And just everything hit me all at once. And I said, you know what? I need somebody to come do this for a second. And I remember going, and I climbed in our truck, and I just sat there, and the Spirit of God just hit me, and I just started bawling. And I cried for probably an hour, no joke. But in that moment, God told me, he said, listen, Zach, you're always going to do these things from now on. You're always going to do these things from now on. And let me just tell you, friend, that if I hadn't taken a faith step to say yes, and then another one to raise the money, to go on the trip, God would have never changed my life. And so I got home a couple weeks later, and I don't remember what I was reading, but I read this statement, and I want to read it to you. When you find your misery, you find your ministry. Well, Zach, I'm not a minister. Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. You are a minister. You're going to reach people that I'll never reach. You're going to reach people that your own pastor, Zach, will never reach. You're going to go places and see things and have the opportunity to do things for God that nobody else that ever has a microphone will ever have the opportunity to do. I want to encourage you today that if you will seek out your purpose, like your life depends on it, your life will instantaneously go from confusion to clarity as soon as you feel that tug on your heart and you see God work through you. I'm going to encourage you today, friend. Your life is not about going to work. You're called to go to work. Your life is not about just raising a beautiful family. You're called to raise a beautiful family. But that is not all that God has called you to. You are called to more than that. And so the musicians can come up, or however we do this. I don't know how you guys do this. But you guys can go ahead and bow your heads and close your eyes. But I want to ask you this. Maybe this message spoke to you today. Maybe you can relate to the rich young ruler. You know, maybe it's money, maybe it's other things. Maybe it is worry. Maybe it's your relationships. Maybe it's the things that you put on the throne of your heart that don't need to be there, that are keeping you from really following God. And so, if that's you, with all of our heads bowed and all of our eyes closed, let me just ask you this. Can you just be honest? Can I just see your hand this morning? See your hand. I see it. I see it. Be honest. This isn't about me. It's about you and God. Can you be honest? Awesome. 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 Let's take just a second. Let's ask yourself this question. Holy Spirit, what are you saying to me? What are you saying? Lord, I thank you for my friends. Lord, I thank you for all that you're doing in their heart. I pray that today they would not be just a hearer of the word, but they'd be a doer of the word. I pray that you would empower them to actually change their life, that they would leave this place and go make a difference, become who that you've called them to be. I've got one more question for you. Perhaps you're here today and you'd say, you know what, Pastor Zach, if I'm being completely honest with you, I don't have this whole God thing figured out. Maybe it's your first time here today, or maybe you've been coming for a while, or maybe you've been in church for a long time, but if you're being honest, you'd say, you know what, I don't have this thing figured out. Well, can I just encourage you today that you're not here by accident, that God had a plan for you this morning, that you'd get up and that you'd be at High Ridge Church so that he could meet you right where you are in that seat today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say a prayer very similar to the prayer that someone said with me years ago, that all that it is it's just an introduction to Jesus. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say a line of this prayer, and I'm going to pause at the end of it and give you a chance to say it with me. So you can say it out loud, or you can say it in your heart, whatever you want to do, whatever you're most comfortable with. We're not here to single anybody out or embarrass anybody, but with all of our heads bowed, all of our eyes closed, I'm going to say this prayer. Say it with me, friend. Jesus, I believe that you're the Son of God. I believe that you came and you died and you rose again so that I could have life and freedom and forgiveness from all of my sin. Jesus, I don't want to do life by myself anymore. Will you come and become the Lord of my life? In Jesus' name. And with all heads bowed and all eyes still closed, if you said that prayer with me, I want to encourage you to take a step of faith. If your heart's beating kind of heavy right now and you're kind of nervous, that's because God's speaking to you. If that was you and you just said that prayer with me, can I just see your hand? Is everybody out there? I see you. I see you. I see you. Fantastic. So with all of our heads bowed, all of our eyes closed, I want to encourage you, in the seat back pocket in front of you, there's a thing called a response card. And can you grab that for me real quick and just show me that you got it, if that was you? I see you. Okay, awesome. Okay, if you will fill out that response card and do me a personal favor, I want to encourage you to drop that off at the info center when you leave today, because what they're going to do is we're actually going to give you a gift, because I believe that you just took the greatest faith step that you could have ever taken, and it's a huge deal, the decision that you just made. And when you go to the info center today, I want you to ask them about baptism, because that is the next step for you. And we have an opportunity for you to take that next step coming up on July 14th, and I want you to be a part of it. I don't want you to just take a small step. I want you to continue to take faith steps and not just be a hearer of the word, but be a doer of the word. And so, church family, look up at me. We've had 4 or 5 people this morning respond to the gospel, and that is a huge deal. That is a huge deal. And so the Bible tells us that anytime anybody ever comes to the Lord, anytime they ever come back to Jesus or come to Jesus for the first time, that they just shut heaven down, and it's just party. They just throw a crazy party. So we want to be the same kind of church. We want to celebrate. We want to encourage those that are taking their walk further with God. And so I want to thank you guys personally so much for having me and my family. We love you guys. You're our High Ridge family. And so thank you for having me. Hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. God bless you guys.